Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Chilling Reign, make sure you go ahead and check out the Poketown store. You can get a 5% discount on your order using that code Omnipoke. For today's video, we are going to be looking at the 5 budget decks of the format that I think are fairly viable and have good longevity into the future. First of all, just a quick few general tips on playing on a budget. I think always being aware of what reprints and promotional cards are coming out is something that can always be important for you. If you do have your eye on certain cards, you may want to wait and hold off to purchase them until you can get their promotional or reprint counterpart, where the price will inevitably decrease as more supply hits the market. I would also stick to 1 or 2 decks during a format or during, at least 6 or so months of a season and try and adapt to that format with your own 60 card deck. That means that really you're only going to be forking out for tech cards rather than completely filling up your binder with every single option of every deck in the format and choosing different ones on different weeks. If you stick to something, you get better with the deck in general, you learn its kinks, and you can adapt it completely to your playstyle as the format progresses. So I think that is definitely a top tip for players coming into the game and trying to pick up just 1 or 2 decks. I think makes the most sense to me. I would always say to proxy before you purchase, especially for newer cards coming out. I think this is something that's a really important thing for you guys. The Limitless TCG website has a really good tool option that is literally a proxy function. You can go ahead, type in your card and get them all printed out. You can cut them out, put them into sleeves in front of just like basic energy cards. Have a play around with those, get the feel of certain decks, whether you like it, whether you think it's strong, and all that good stuff. You can flush out tons of cards that you may have otherwise purchased and then not needed later down the line. I think this is a really, really good tip. At the same time, even when cards are out, you can go ahead and build on PTCGO instead and do the exact same thing. Get some testing in, see how you like the deck, see if it's something that you want to go ahead and invest in for IRL play between friends, or if you're going to local tournaments or whatever that's going on right now. Make sure you get it all on PTCGO first, because of course you can always trade and trade back quite easily on PTCGO. It's not like you're investing that money and then having to sell it all again in person. It's a lot easier all through that platform. So I would definitely suggest testing all of these things before committing your wallet to those cards. At the same time, I would suggest stocking up on staples. Although I'm going to be talking about 5 specific decks today, there will be lots of crossover between cards that pretty much are needed in all archetypes to function. The likes of Professor's Research, Marnie, Boss's Orders, Quick Ball. These are all cards that you're going to see in pretty much every one of the decks today because they are integral to, pretty much how every deck functions. Now let's just talk about Pokemon at the moment and how expensive the top decks in the game are. The Shadow Rider Calyrex is actually the most expensive deck out the blocks. This card has a lot of hype behind it right now. It's obviously a newer card, so supply isn't all there just yet. And really, the most expensive decks that you can see on this slide, the ones that are breaching the 3-figure marks, these are all VMAX decks. And they're expensive because you need to buy usually 4 of the regular V, and then 3 to 4 copies of the VMAX as well. So that naturally just ramps up your cost basis quite quickly because you're having to buy lots of ultra rare cards, and some of the more popular VMAXs like Calyrex and Eternatus, these can be like $10 plus cards quite easily, and you're having to get multiple copies of them, and that's really what changes their value compared to some of the other ones on this slide. Even things like Zacian Luke Metal and Zacian ADP, they're all basics, so you're only buying the regular V cards. Also, Zacian specifically, and as well as these tag team Pokemon, they've received reprints, so that has also brought that price down quite significantly. I actually think it's amazing that we have a number of good decks in the game right now. To be honest, these are the top 6 performing decks so far that we have in Chilling Reign, and 3 of them are already under $100. So I actually think Pokemon is in a really good spot price-wise right now. It's not a difficult game to get into too much. It won't break the bank. And to be honest, the Luke Metal on this slide, I haven't got it on the budget list, but for $55 basically, you can get what is probably the top 5 deck in the format right now, and hopefully can adapt into the future. I know Lucario Melmetal is only here for a couple more months because rotation is coming in September, but I do think the core of Zacian Zamazenta will still be a solid option. So I just wanted to give you some context of what current decks in the game cost right now, because to be honest, it's not that much of a jump up to just go for some of the best decks in the game than it is to talk about some of these budget ones. So just a small note there. With that said, let's jump into our first budget deck, and this is going to be around $20 to acquire, so a very cheap archetype, and you can see its focus is all around one prize Pokemon. A few things to note about this list, and the top 5 in general, every single card is going to be post-rotation based. There will be no cards in the outside of the Sword and Shield set. So it's going to start from Sword and Shield base and go all the way up to our current standard, which is Chilling Reign standard. Of course, when rotation does actually hit, we will also have the Evolving Skies set included, but I haven't added any of those cards to these decks just yet, but I might mention some along the way. For example, in Evolving Skies, we're going to be getting the sort of Rescue Pod, I think it's called, that could replace Ordinary Rod in this deck as a way to get back additional Pokemon. The reason why this archetype is so cheap is because we're all one prize based, no Vs at all in here. We're going to be using Inteleon to be a bit of a backup engine alongside Octillery. You typically want to get one of these Octilleries into play to give yourself some extra search. The idea around the Malamar deck is to acquire as many Rapid Strike cards in your hand all at one time, because that is going to be your damage output. Malamar does a 40 times multiplier for each Rapid Strike card in your hand that you shuffle back into your deck. So it feels very similar to something like a Bucephalon or potentially a Galarian Mr. Rime if you tried any of those decks, where you're trying to accumulate lots of resources all at once and then get big blowout knockouts. That's what we're looking for with this list. So you can see some quite unconventional supporter cards. We're saving a lot of cash because we're not buying into lots of Boss's Orders. We're not buying any Marnies. We're not buying any Quick Balls, some of the more expensive trainer cards. We're having some of these alternative ones like Brawly and Karina's Focus, because they don't go into every deck, but because they have this Rapid Strike tag, they work very nicely in this specific list. Sticking with an Inteleon package, and I think that's going to be a theme you see on our top 5, it's a great alternative to just going down the Dedenne, Crobat, Eldegoss kind of route right now. We're going to have Decidueye. Now, again, Decidueye is going to be, a post-rotation list, so it might be looking a little bit different to what you know right now and how it looks, because I know oftentimes at the moment it is one of the top 10 decks in the game right now, performance-wise. So this is probably the best deck on the list just out the gate if you want to have the most competitive budget deck. And this is a post-rotation list, of course, so it may look a little bit different. There's not Sinlin, there's not Malolana, there's a couple, there's no communication. But outside of that, thick on the ball search, we're pretty much functionally the exact same deck. And a great thing to note for Decidueye in the post-rotation meta is that you don't have to worry about ADP. ADP decks often were a foil to Decidueye because they would often have an easy include of Aegislash or naturally played Mawile and can force Pokemon into play for easy 2-prize knockouts on these 1-prize Pokemon, and that won't be the case going forward. You will have to downgrade to a 50 hit point Rowlet, which is a little bit annoying compared to the current 60 hit point Rowlet, but outside of that, pretty happy, and you can just go into tournaments with this right now, basically, and have reasonable results. So Decidueye is pretty much my top pick. It's around $35 to get it built. It's functioning very well in the format currently, so you can just buy it today and it will be useful in tournaments. And if you buy the exact list in front of you, you won't have to worry about rotation at all. You can keep it exactly the same and continue with this archetype. For the final of the Inteleon decks, we've got an interesting Vikavolt V list. The idea around this list is going to try and item lock people with that first attack from Vikavolt and buy as many turns as possible with a combination of Boss's Orders Galamine to trap Pokemon into the active position. And while we're doing this damage to the active with Vikavolt, we will also be using Inteleon's quick shooting ability to target down bench Pokemon, set up the threats that your opponent is building in the back for KOs. Because, of course, Vikavolt does also have a Super Zap Cannon attack that does 190 damage, so quite good output there in the later stages of the game to finish off Pokemon once you've put them in range with the Inteleon. The other way that you're going to try and buy turns is with Team Yellhorn. You will have to get your Vikavolt in and out of the active, so that's why you're seeing such a high count of Birdkeeper as well as 4 copies of Switch here, so that we can Yellhorn either Birdkeeper into a second Vikavolt if it's already got enough energy in play. If not, you can go Birdkeeper and then switch straight back into the same Vikavolt. You remove your own confusion, which is really nice, and then the opponent is going to have to flip a coin to do any damage at all. And if they do flip that tails, they're taking damage themselves through the status condition, but then you also get more time to use more quick shootings and build up your board state. So I'm actually kind of surprised this current format isn't seeing an archetype like this do too much. I think Vikavolt is still a fairly unexplored card in this current format with this extra damage modifier of Inteleon. So I would like to see this have a little bit more play in the game, but I think into rotation, this has more legs because Galamine can't be so easily countered by Chaotic Swell right now, and Marshadow, you actually trap things much more easily, which I think is brilliant for you. And yeah, that's going to be a good option in the post-rotation metagame, and it's still keeping that nice Inteleon package. This time we're going heavy on the quick shooting for extra damage mod. Next up, we have a quad Blissey deck. The only Pokemon in this deck is Blissey V, and that's one of the main reasons why the value gets shrunk down all the way to $20, because we are literally homing in on this one Pokemon's one attack, Blissful Blast, where we're going to try and stack up a bunch of energy cards in our discard pile so that Blissey can attach them all to itself. This has seen a bit of success. It's one of the top 20 decks in the format currently. The list in front of you, of course, does have to cater for post-rotation, so we are cutting a few cards. We've had to cut Malamar, which I think is one of the bigger ones, and I've had to cut some of the special energy. You will have to get rid of Weakness Guard energy, which is a little bit awkward with Urshifu potentially roaming around and being an awkward matchup now. The few additions I have gone for, I've added in Milo instead of Hapu, because Hapu, of course, rotates. Milo is another discard synergy supporter to go alongside your research to get yourself extra ways to put energy into that discard pile while still continuing to draw cards. I have put a couple Melanies in here as well, not really as a huge draw option, but to give yourself some extra damage output and to cover up the gap of losing Malolana for healing. We've actually gone for the Team Yell Towel. It's not really a card that you expect to see too often, but it can fit a niche in this deck. It heals 50 from both active Pokemon, but because Blissey ramps its damage even higher, sometimes you don't mind healing the opponent's active, and of course you can try and time this Team Yell Towel to a situation where you've knocked out your opponent's active, then they've come in and hit you with a new Pokemon, then you spam your Team Yell Towels and get some free heals off from your item card, maybe even combine it with Hyper Potion to fully heal that Blissey. That's really the emphasis here. Blissey has a natural 250 hit points, which is very high on a basic Pokemon. You have those Cape of Toughness to push yourself up to 300 hit points. You have Path to the Peak to stop your opponent's abilities. And you have Crushing Hammer in here as well for some added disruption. So this archetype isn't really setting the world alight right now. It is quite a simple deck to learn and to play, though, which I think is good for beginners. And it also starts at that very low $20 mark. And the final deck I wanted to discuss is similar to the Luke Metal archetype that we talked about, which is currently a top, 10 deck in the format, probably a top 5 deck in the format currently, budget or otherwise. And we're making a few adaptations to make it that little bit cheaper. Now, a lot of these changes are actually because of rotation. This would look a lot more similar to current Lucario Melmetal, were it not for those changes. But we have had to cut out the Tag Call package here, and we've added in a few different supporter cards. We're playing Bird Keepers now for some extra switching opportunities, going more conventional with that supporter count. And of course, you can't play Lucario Melmetal, so we're going to try and make our Zamazentas as tanky as possible with the help of Toughness Capes as well as Sir Chester Bath. It's a stadium card that hasn't seen a lot of play right now, but it could possibly see play into the future where you make your Zamazenta that little bit more awkward to hit. It's not a fantastic stadium card, but you need to have bounces to Path to the Peak, because that's how many archetypes will try and get around the Dauntless Shield of Zamazenta V. So having that high stadium count in general is going to be important to make sure that you get your abilities and keep them online, especially on that Zamazenta for the tanking approach. So we've actually seen this sort of approach do well in the format already. I think Zamazenta and Zacian are two cards that are very, very strong, so it's really good to put your stock into these cards right now because they've already proven themselves successful, and I imagine they will continue to be successful going into the future because they just have such good support around them. The Metal Source is incredible. Intrepid Sword's really good energy acceleration. You get to play a Ranguru in here as well to try and make the most out of attachments from Intrepid Sword. So that can also be another great deal for you guys. So yeah, another similar to Blissey in how you're trying to make an awkward wall a lot of the time. Zacian is usually just going to be helping you draw cards throughout the game, but also being an answer to regular V Pokemon. Oftentimes, when people can't use V Maxes to deal with Zamazenta, they look towards V Pokemon, and Zacian is very good at clearing those off the board straight away with a Brave Blade. So again, very nice in general. The Toughness Capes can, of course, go on the Zacian as well if you do need to power through certain Pokemon. So a pretty interesting archetype, and I think it has legs post-rotation. So thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you did enjoy this top 5 budget decks. Of course, looking towards rotation straight away is a bit of a crystal ball thing. So if you do want to look at some archetypes that could, some extra cards that could go into some of these decks right now, I think Pokemon Communication is one of the biggest ones. Potentially some tag team supporters like Cynthia Caitlin, Malolana, Guzmahala, those sorts of cards are worth potentially adding in, even if you are getting use out of them for only a couple of months. But that's up to you guys. I wanted to give all of these archetypes a bit more longevity. So if you are dipping your toe in Pokemon TCG right now, you can have them, helpful for you for at least a year. That's kind of the deal here. All of these cards that I've shown today in the deck lists are not rotating in September. We will have them probably until next September, so a long time to be playing with these archetypes. Let me know your thoughts about the top 5 list. How would you be playing them? What's your favorite among those cards that I showed off today? And potentially, when you saw how cheap the best decks in the game are, do you think it's worth taking the plunge straight away and going for the top archetypes in the game? I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.